this for giving all of us in the Senate.
Are we all good to go? Awesome, I'll start. Hello, everyone. Before we begin, we would like to ask you all to please put your cell phones on silent or vibrate, and please step into the hallway if you need to take a call. Because this is filmed for broadcast on Public Access Channel 180 and Great River Arts YouTube channel, please speak into the mic at the podium. Please state your full name, your city, and county before you ask your question. The update is scheduled to end at noon today. Welcome to the Little Falls Area Chamber of Commerce and Tourism sponsored legislative update. My name is Parva Watton, and I'm the President and CEO of the Little Falls Area Chamber of Commerce and Tourism, and I thank you all for being here today. Thank you to Senator Wiesenberg, Representative Ron Krisha, Representative Schultz, and Representative Mike Wiener for being with us today and taking the time to do this for us. Thank you. We will start today with hearing from our representatives. After that, we will open the floor for questions and comments from the audience, and then we will have a closing statement, and then we should be done by noon. If anyone would like to have information of the representatives, like their contact information, it's at the podium towards the door over there. I ask that speakers organize their thoughts and do not exceed 2 to 3 minutes at the podium. This will allow for everyone who wishes to address issues the time to do so. Please limit your remarks to the issues that pertain to state government. We would also like to remind the public that the views expressed during this session are those of the individual making the comments and not those of the Little Falls Area Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. We will start with hearing from all our guests. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. My name is Senator Nathan Wiesenberg, if you don't know who I am. It's good to see everyone here this morning. I know it's 10 a.m. on a nice summer day, but it's good to have people show up and listen to what happened during this legislative session. Do you want us to introduce ourselves, or should I just start going? Or
You can just
let's rock and roll. Okay. So, so this last session, maybe I'll start where it ended. It ended poorly. I think we would all agree to that, people on the stage anyway. There was lots of bills that Democrats didn't get to have heard, so they put everything in one huge omnibus bill on Sunday at about 10:30 at night. And that's not how we have good governance. Even if I don't like the bill, at least I should have the opportunity to read it and hear it, because that's what you should be afforded by your government. It's you who needs to know what's in those bills. If I don't know what's in it, you don't know what's in it, and we can't come back to you and talk about it. So I think it was a 1,400-page bill, double-sided, that was pushed through, in the very end, and we didn't get to read it. We didn't get to see it. It wasn't posted online, and we followed no rules, and that's how we ended the session, not knowing what the government is. Who said it? Nancy Pelosi or someone, I'm sure, said we got to pass the bills to see what's in them. Well, that's not how it should work. We need to read bills, and that's how we know what's in it, and then we get debate it. And that's what government's about, is talking and debating. That's why we're here today, to talk to you and listen to ideas, and see what we need to do and how we can work for you better. And we can't do that if we're on the Senate or House floor and we don't get to talk to each other. If the other side doesn't let us debate, how do we do what's best for our state and our community and our country? So that's how it ended, which is not okay with anybody. So I still don't know what's in the whole bill. It's a big bill, and I've been busy and mowing lawn and taking care of stuff, and so we're getting through it. But some things, Minnesota's becoming a state that's increasingly hard to have a business. We're increasing taxes on small business owners down to one person. The taxes you have to pay just to be in the state are ridiculous. The regulations are ridiculous. We need less regulations. We need less taxes. We need to be more business friendly. How do you feed your family? How do you employ people if we aren't in a business friendly state? So I think that some people don't understand the government. If we can grow business, then people make money, people spend more money, rather than the government taking it and deciding how to help you spend your money. I think your money should stay in your pocket. I think we should have smaller government. We should have less government. We should have less taxes. And it's better off keeping that money in your pocket and you spend it how you need to, rather than the government holding your hand and telling you what you need and what you don't need. I know there are people that need help, and that's fine. I appreciate that. But there's lots of people that are abusing the system. And that's one thing that we can't have. And then, the fraud that's happening in Minnesota. we can't stop it. There's no way to stop it. Or, Steve Simon, he was speaking last week, and we have a new program for automatically registering people to vote. So once you get a driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote. So I don't know exactly. Maybe they can help me here when we talk about elections, but you're automatically registered to vote. You can get a driver's license from anywhere in the world in Minnesota, and it doesn't regulate if you're, a Minnesotan or a citizen or not a citizen, and you can vote. And now I think 16 and 17-year-olds are also automatically registered to vote. So when you get a driver's license, I should back up a second. When you get a driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote. And to not be registered to vote, you have to opt out. So if you don't opt out, who's going to audit that? Not our state government, because they're trying to steal votes so they can keep winning. We can't allow that to happen. Voting, it should be very sacred, and should be afforded to you. We can't have 45-day voting. They want 45-day voting so they can cheat. There's mail-in ballots. We don't need mail-in ballots. We can have absentee ballots. Thank you. I always forget absentee. I don't know why, but we can have absentee ballots. There's people that might be overseas in the military. They need an absentee ballot, or someone who's sick in the hospital, or elderly people. Yeah, let's have absentee ballots. But all this is just for fraud. So we need to win, and we need to take it back. We need to change things back to 1-day voting, not 45 days to see what we're losing here. So let's spend more money here. That's all it is. They're going to see, someone's going to see what we're losing in a certain area. Let's put more funding in there. No, let's get out. Let's tell people what we're about, and let's actually treat voting like it should be treated. And that's people need to understand, if you want to win, you got to grab your friends and family, neighbors' hands and say, let's go vote and let's make changes. You might not like everything I do, but I'm fighting for people. I'm not fighting for bigger government. That's what we need. We need the people, and not increase government. So that's what we need to vote for. Once you get your certain elected official in, talk to them about what you can do. Yeah, I think I'll pass it on here. I could just talk for 2 hours myself, but go ahead, Mike.
Are you sure you're done?
I'll
For now.
say.
Okay. Well, thanks, Senator. Thank you, Chamber of Commerce, for putting this on, and thank you, people, citizens, for showing up. This is politics is a sport, is an environment where the people who show up have their voices be heard. Voting is essential, and if we're not participating, if we're not showing up, then somebody else is. So it's absolutely crucial for people to be here. So thank you for having this opportunity. There's a lot that was said there by the senator, and I guess as a first termer, just got through first 2 years of being a House rep, it's been educational. And probably the most educational thing is how the system is working or not working. We saw this last session especially, and it was hit on, about omnibus bills at the end of session. That is a travesty. That's not the way our government is supposed to work. And the downfall, or the biggest impact on that, is the citizens themselves. It's not working for the citizens. The partisan politics that are going back and forth that causes a 1,400-page bill passed at the last second does not work for the people. So what I've seen, and actually the conversation I was having on the way over this morning, is how do you look at the system and how do you get it back to where it's supposed to be, working for the people? And I think that's our biggest struggle right now. Omnibus bills, according to our Constitution, we're actually against them. They're unconstitutional. Section 4, I believe Article 7, single line item bills. We're not doing that. And we do see a lot of instances where there is bipartisan support. Those are the bills that are supposed to make it to the floor. James Madison said that government is supposed to be in a perpetual state of gridlock, except for the bills, the legislation that has bipartisan support. And there are many of those. And what we saw, especially what I witnessed and realized, was when bills come to committee, and we had both sides looking at the bill and saying, this is a good bill. This will help the people in Minnesota. Whether it was a tax credit, economic development in an area, whatever it was, and we said, this is a good bill. But then it got laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. That's not the way this is supposed to go. So I always use the water comparison when it comes to omnibus bills. I say if you took this water, and it's 95% water, but you dumped 5% poison in that, would you drink the water? Most of us, pretty much all of us, would say no. Omnibus bill is the same way. You can have 95% good things in that omnibus bill, but you can have 5% that's pure poison. That doesn't work for the people, that's driven, however, ideologically or whatever, that I can't vote for. And those are the things that are tearing our state apart, I feel. So let's get back to the rule of law. Let's get back to our Constitution. And I don't have the 1,400-page bill. This is just the 217, I think, page breakdown of the bill. Just the synopsis of it. Do you know how long it takes to go through this? Let alone a 1,400-page bill? We can do better. We need to do better in this state. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions moving forward, and I'll pass it on to Representative Schultz.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and taking the time out of your day to spend some time with us. We are eager to hear your questions and your comments from this legislative session. By comparison to what happened in 2023, a lot less happened because this wasn't a budget year. This was a year that was supposed to be dedicated towards policy changes at the state capitol rather than setting the budget for the state. That impacts the taxpayers. In part, though, there were additional spending items that were passed this legislative session. Some positive changes, some negative. From the very beginning of session, I think even when we had our early session or start of session event here, I talked about how at that point in time there wasn't really anything big that had passed or changed that was super significant. At the very beginning of session, some of you may remember that there were a few key things that had to be changed because of what happened during the last legislative session, the mistakes that were made. And one of those things was changing the tax code to be in line for people to ensure that they weren't being taxed an additional amount of money that the Minnesota Department of Revenue had actually made a mistake on last year. So that was fixed early in session. We also fixed the school resource officer issue because of what the Democrats had done, because of the radical Democrats from Minneapolis and St. Paul who are trying to continue to demonize law enforcement. And they had passed a bill last year that made it ambiguous for our local law enforcement entities to partner with school districts to be able to have and to create those positive relationships between kids and law enforcement officers at that earliest stage and keep our schools safe, which is what school resource officers do across the state. But because of what had passed last year, additional liability was placed upon the local law enforcement officers, and so we needed to change that. And fortunately, especially in the House Republican caucus, we have some fantastic law enforcement officers who went to work making sure that we got the language right that would protect our law enforcement officers and allow for the partnerships to be recreated between municipalities and schools on that. And so that was a positive change that came early in session. And then as we headed towards the end of session, I think what I saw from the outside was that there was actually a lot more division amongst Democrats than I anticipated. As they approached the final months, the final weeks of the legislative session, it appeared like their tent, if we'll call it that, the Democratic tent, was fighting with one another. From the people who were in swing districts to the people who were kind of from the very far radical left. And the radical left was holding the state hostage for the biggest things that they wanted. And there's a few key things that really stick out to me. But then at a key moment in time, I can't remember if it was 6 weeks or so ahead of the end of the legislative session, as you may recall, the state Senate is divided 34 to 33. And then Senator Nicole Mitchell was arrested for burglarizing her mother-in-law's home up in the Detroit Lakes area. And that put a cloud over the rest of the legislative session as she was taking votes after being a charged felon. And as that played itself out towards the end of the legislative session, that really meant that a lot of the major debate and hearty debate that Minnesotans deserve to have on the big issues that were going to be happening during this legislative session, frankly, those discussions weren't being had. And I'm sure Senator Wiesenberg can talk about this more, but there were weeks upon weeks where there was basically no Senate business, where there was no debate taking place on the issues as they were dealing internally with how to deal with Senator Mitchell. And the result of that is some of these issues that ended up being put in this 1,400-page bill weren't thoroughly and appropriately vetted. And instead of taking these issues one by one through a policy sense, the way that they're supposed to be constitutionally and the way that would be right for all the people of Minnesota, what they did was they just jammed it all, or a large section of it, into one massive bill at the end. And so we have taken to calling that bill, that 1,400-page bill, Grand Theft Omnibus, because of the fact that that passed with Senator Mitchell's vote on the very last night of session. And there's a whole bunch within that bill. Certainly there's some things that I'm sure that the people in this room could agree upon that would be positive, but as Representative Wiener said, there are also big challenges and changes. And some of the things that we prioritized during the course of session were removed from that bill. And I'm going to call out one specific thing right now that I was disappointed to see be left at the table. There had been a bipartisan group of legislators supporting our disabled veterans across the state and helping to change their property taxes and to bring in line basically the support through their property taxes and raise the threshold for disabled veterans. Raise their property tax exemption higher, and that had passed in the House. And that was a lot of work that took place on a bipartisan basis, veterans on both sides of the aisle working towards this, that had passed the House. I believe it passed the Senate, too. And then in conference committee, this mega bill, this 1,400 Grand Theft Omnibus, stripped that out that would have better helped and supported our veterans when they haven't seen this change in almost 20 years, to bring in line that property tax support in line with where current inflationary costs would be. So that was a frustrating thing. The other thing that you saw in the final days was that the legislature was taken hostage by one state senator from Minneapolis, Senator Fateh. Senator Fateh chose not to show up for work the day before the end of session. And he was holding the legislature hostage to get his solution for the Uber and Lyft drivers in the Twin Cities, something that many of us in rural communities don't necessarily have a lot of experience with. But he was holding out, trying to force his hand on the Uber and Lyft issue. And the day before, the night before the final day, the governor, Senator Fateh, and Democrats came together, united around this idea that they had solved and fixed this issue related to Uber and Lyft. Well, they had held themselves hostage to that point. They hadn't been able to even negotiate with themselves. It was a failure to lead, and the result of their inaction and the result of their work was that they didn't have the time. From the point in time that they came to this magical agreement on Uber and Lyft, they did not have the time to process the paperwork for the 1,400-page bill. It was a failure of leadership. They had 2 full years of complete Democrat control. They could have passed these bills one by one. They could have moved them through the legislative process. And if it didn't have the votes to pass on its own, then it shouldn't have passed. But the result was that at the very end, about 25 hours after their agreement on this Uber and Lyft issue, they sent a bill to the House floor that ultimately, hours later, we found out was 1,400 plus pages long, double-sided. And that bill came to the floor of the House and was not available for the public. Was not available for us. There was no hard copy and there was no digital copy. And there was a vote taken without debate and without discussion, without even knowing any of the context of the bill. That's a dereliction of duty. Like, we each take an oath to uphold the Constitution, but more than anything, we have to get to a point where we are restoring the public trust in government and in institutions of society. This was a major breakdown in that. To me, the issue is the fact that we couldn't even read it before voting on it. That's the issue. You pass a massive piece of legislation with huge implications for many sections of the state, and no one, not the Speaker of the House, not the Senate Majority Leader, and certainly not any one of us had a chance to see that bill. And that shouldn't have happened that way. So we have to restore the public trust. And know that, especially for us in central Minnesota, but if you want to make it a little bit more global, during complete Democrat control of state government, it has felt as though only half of Minnesota is represented. And if we, because we didn't, have any role in crafting that bill, there was no way for half of Minnesota to have any input on the contents of that bill. So that's frustrating, and it's a big reason why we need to change course and bring some balance. Balance in part because we just need to get back to the basics and restore the trust that we need to have in the institutions of government. So I'm sure we'll get into many more things, and Representative Krusha has a lot more.
Actually, I don't. A lot's been covered, but thank you. Thank you to my colleagues for. So I'll just go where Representative Schultz. There's no balance, and if you look back at what happened, the wheels came off, and that happened because there's no equilibrium down in St. Paul. We have one party that controls everything, and I'm not a big politics guy. I don't get into the party politics. There's 134 districts. And let me stop before I go further. I want to call out, so by the way, County Administrator Matt LeBlanc, thank you for being here. I see Representative Fishbach's office, Mandy Heffron's here, and I think hiding in the back somewhere is Commissioner Lemire. There he is. Did I miss anybody else? So thank you for being here. And to Commissioner Lemire and Administrator LeBlanc, I'm going to jump around a little bit because I don't want to miss my talking points. But one of the biggest problems that Representative Schultz talked about with the Uber Lyft, I don't care about Uber Lyft. I really don't. That's a business model. Those businesses can handle it. What I care about is the fact that preemption became the norm. That when an area comes up with a conflict, and the City Council in Minneapolis had decided they wanted to change the ride sharing, fine, change it. I don't care. I'll find another ride. But what they did was they preempted the rest of the state, and the state stepped in and created a policy for everyone. And that then takes the hands out of our local folks, whether you're a city council, whether you're a county commissioner, or a state school board, or a regular local school board. So that's the problem and where we're headed, where the state believes that preemption can be a solution, and it should not ever be a solution. So the other problem with the Uber Lyft is the consumer was left out. Nobody's talking about the fact that all we did, the people that won on that were Uber and Lyft. They now get to charge more, and the city council now gets to raise fees and regulate a business in their jurisdiction. The consumer loses out. The consumer's prices have gone up because of that problem. So that was a big reason why I had a problem with that. When we go to balance, and as I said, I'm not a politics guy. I'm a problem solution. I believe I'm elected to go down there and solve the problems that we have in front of us. The problems that I hear from this district are broadband workforce shortages, regulations, and really helping that small business climate grow. If we're going to continue to grow in these communities, whether it's Aiken that I represent or around the Mille Lacs Lake, it's about the economics and allowing people to bring dollars in, whether they're tourist dollars, and keeping those dollars fueling our local economies. What we're seeing is terrible mismanagement at the Mille Lacs Lake area right now, so that economy is hurting. And we're watching things that come in from the government on broadband. In fact, if you look at the federal government on the broadband equity program that they have, the BEAD program, those dollars aren't going to flow to Minnesota. They're not going to flow to rural communities like I've been fighting for, because what the federal government in their wisdom has done is said, hey, if you're going to bring in rural broadband, you have to offer a very low-cost solution. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So they're doing price controls. They're regulating the companies that are putting the fiber in, forgetting that those fiber lines are the most expensive. So we have that. We're not solving the workforce shortage. Talk to the businesses. What we do is we have one side that doesn't want anybody to work, and they've passed all kinds of expansions on unemployment and benefits to get people out of jobs. And then we have another side that doesn't want to bring any new people in and allow for a new workforce. Well, that's not going to work. If we're not going to find workers for our businesses, we're going to be left with an economy that's going to continue to shrink back. And what does a shrinking economy mean? Look at the housing prices. Talk to a 25 to 30-year-old who's trying to find a home right now, and the wages that they have. It's very, very difficult. And if they can't find homes in these communities, they're not going to set up families. They're not going to help build our economies, and that's just a big problem. I mean, other things that we missed out on when there's no balance. Rural EMS. Rural EMS is a big problem, and there was agreement to get emergency services funding to areas of the state. We have we rely on volunteer EMS services. There's not enough of them, and they're just not going to be there. And what you're going to be left to is very expensive rural health care, such as helicopters, because there's just not people funding these volunteer services. And that money was available. That money was absolutely available. We could have found that. The second thing on that is long-term care. And the reason long-term care continues to be put off to the side is because the metro area has plenty of long-term care. They have a high-density population, and they really don't worry about rural long-term care and nursing homes and elderly care. And the problem with that is the rural legislators forget they're driving 10 miles to a couple different towns. We're driving 60 to 70 miles to see our relatives that could be in long-term care, and having a hard time keeping those care facilities open. So when I look at this, I look at what lack of balance has done, and we've tipped this to the government now is more on the metro legislator side, which tends to be the majority party of the Democrats. And what's happening is now, and we have a governor who is taking zero accountability. I don't like to go after the governor. I want to respect the office of the governor, but I will tell you that the governor that we have now, Tim Walz, has given so much question, all this fraud, taken zero accountability. In any other company, in any company I've ever run, if something were to happen that was not going the right way, you take accountability and you figure out how to fix it. That's what businesses do. That's what we would expect our county governments to do, our state our city councils, our school boards. Take the accountability and go. What we saw was a Commissioner Jett and a governor that said, nah, what me worried, there was no problem there. I mean, people do things that, sometimes, and that's not right. The number one job in those agencies is to protect the tax dollars that come through there. So here we have a governor that no accountability. If you go back and, it's in our past, but let's look at the failure of the Minneapolis during the George Floyd. So we have all of these things. We have a governor that has no accountability, doesn't show that he's necessarily going to be on top of things, and right now we have Mankato flooding. And we have a dam that's already been compromised, and the governor's talking special session. Why? We put $50 million into emergency funding. We know FEMA's going to step in. We know there's going to be federal. But this governor, rather than actually looking at the problem and finding out, hey, let's see how bad this is going to be. Let's figure out what's going to happen, because the water's going to do what the water's going to do. But let's come up with a proposal. I'm not against if we have a dam that compromises and we need to step in as a state government. But right now, I don't think the governor can be trusted on a solution. Because what I'm seeing is the governor is calling for a special session already without knowing all the facts, saying, hey, we should maybe do this. What he really wants to do is pass a bonding bill that they failed on last time. And because there's no balance, there's no trust, there's no accountability, and I think we're in a really bad spot. Unfortunately, I think Mankato is going to find the the government's not working really well, and there's going to be some residents that are going to have some devastation because of that. So I would echo what you've already heard. We need balance. We need to break the hold of the trifecta. And again, I'm not a politics person. I mean, we have 134 seats. We're going to have Democrats. We're going to have Republicans. We have to deal with that reality. That's the way we were put up with gridlock. But the reality is right now you have none of that. That omnibus bill that was passed on the last day, by the way, didn't have to pass. We'd already funded the government. We didn't need another bill. What we needed was time to figure out some problems and put the right solutions in place, not to shove something through. So I was down there. I apologize for what happened. I wish I'd have been able to do more to stop it. I think there's many of us that wish, but it was pretty atrocious to watch it go through. And it's not something the state should be proud of. So questions? I'm assuming we're going to questions next. So thank you, everyone, for being here.
Actually, I'd like to. So I'll be real quick, but one thing I did want to mention about elections, and now you can vote from. You could live in a tent or a tarp and just put on a map where you live. You don't even need an address, or you can just say this is where I'm from. And we want to pass laws where I can vouch for someone. I no longer have to be a Minnesota resident. I just have to be a resident of the United States and have to be 18. But how do I prove that if I don't need an ID? So now we're going to be passing laws in Minnesota where you can say I live at X, and this person who says they're from the United States, but I can't prove that because they don't need an ID, and also who says they're 18 can vouch for me. That's something we're dealing with elections, and I think that's probably about it. The Senator, I was going to talk about the Senator Mitchell thing. Isaac hit on that pretty well, but we can't have a felon who's voting. She was convicted of first-degree felony burglary for breaking into a home when someone didn't know that she was in there. She broke in through the basement window of her mom's house. And luckily, her mother woke up at 4:30 in the morning when Senator Mitchell was laying next to her bed wearing black in a room without lights on. So what was she going to do to her mother? And that really bothers me. This person shouldn't be a senator. I think they should be in jail. And I have talked to people who have seen the video, and that video needs to come out, and she needs to be prosecuted. So we can't be running our government with people like that in there. So anyway, thank you.
We will now open the floor for questions. Thank you. Oh, the podium. Thank you. Yeah.
John Justin, John Justin from Little Falls Township, Morrison County. In a nutshell, the veterans, I talked about earlier about trying to get the veteran cemetery opened up to all veterans with honorable discharge. I won't go into all the details. Went the last time I talked to you. I understand that did not get through. So my first question will be is that going to be brought up again at the next session? The other thing I want to talk about is the way things are now with the Democrat side of the party. It used to be that they had the pro-choice group and the pro-life group could agree on things that help pregnant women. Things like the women's right to know, the affirmative action, which gave help to pregnant women and allowed religious groups and the pro-life groups to help these women, which was stripped away and changed to, the money was then given to organizations that perform abortions and that are receptive to abortions. Areas like the Abortion Recording Act, which would give us figures so we know what's going on. These things were stripped away, and these things that would be actually pro-choice and pro-life, they fit in both camps. But it's gotten to the point where in the Democratic Party, you cannot no longer be pro-choice, you have to be pro-abortion. You can't do anything that in any way looks like it's pro-life, even though it fits both our philosophies. Do you see anything at all within the Democratic Party where they can come together on these issues that fit both our philosophies, where we agree on? Because I just don't see that happening now where it used to happen quite frequently, where we could help the pregnant women, but if it looks pro-life, they say, no, we can't help them. We have to put our funds towards the other area. And there's a lot of other examples, of course, that I didn't list here that have been going on throughout the years. So is there any chance of working with the Democrat Party where we have agreement, or is that just right now gone to the point where that just is not going to happen?
I guess I can start. I think we all have something to say. Yeah, it's sad that we have to either be pro-abortion and pro-death, and that's it. You know, we're taking money away from help centers, like defunding them, and putting that towards abortion centers. So we're closing help centers where, this is actually, I think, from Mike Weiner, so maybe I could let him talk about it, but like 70% of women who have abortions wouldn't have an abortion if they had help, but they're not getting help. So let's help them, and let's find other ways to do this. And another thing I want to say about this, it's, you know, we have people saying, well, women's health, and I can kill the baby if I don't want it. Well, maybe we shouldn't be having sex. Maybe we should practice abstinence. And that's something I want to bring up because I brought this up. I'm in education policy, and we were talking about how in schools we're going to teach kids how to have safe sex and give them condoms and do these things. And I brought up abstinence, and the room like kind of went ballistic. They said, we can't teach that to our kids. The only thing that we're supposed to be teaching our kids in public schools is abstinence. We're not supposed to be teaching them all this other garbage. But we can't talk about that. So that's where we need to start is, you know, respecting our bodies and respecting ourselves. And there's that lack of respect in the Democrat Party because of lots of, and when I say Democrats, if there's Democrats, I'm not saying you're a horrible person. I'm talking about the people I'm working with, the far left extreme people in St. Paul. You know, there are good Democrats. So yes, like I'll bring up Senator John Hoffman again. I almost had him voting on I brought up the Life at Conception Amendment last year, and he was going to vote with us, and for reasons I would take a long time to talk about, he didn't. But he doesn't like it. So I've been telling people, call him, email him, and say, I'm praying for you, and I still hope you can get on board with the Republicans to do something. Because right now we need one vote, depending on what happens in the special elections. You know, Senator Kelly Morrison, she did just resign, so we are at a 33-33 Senate right now. She's running for Congress, so we're running, there's an election that's going to happen in Minnetonka. We're pushing hard to try to flip that seat. Senator Mitchell, hopefully she gets convicted and she gets kicked out and goes to jail. We'll have a special election in the East Metro. And I actually was door knocking over there, and we just targeted Democrats. And the Democrats are frustrated at Senator Mitchell for what she did and why she's still voting. Because as much as they might like whatever they think, it's fine. They don't think that's the way to do it. You can't break into someone's home and be a convicted felon, or not convicted. She wasn't convicted, but you know, she was charged that way, and you shouldn't be making law. But sorry, so I got off topic. Yeah, we need to keep pushing on some of these people. Hopefully, we can get in their head and say, let's not be killing everybody. Because even right now, we passed a law last year. We can't keep track of abortions in Minnesota anymore. We don't know how many abortions happen because it's illegal to know. So the doctor can't check it. And now, if there's doctors that are going to perform abortions, what are they doing with these aborted babies? And I brought this up, and it's tongue in cheek, but it's just to bring awareness to people. Are we going to start taxing baby parts? So what are we doing with these babies once they're born? This is sick and it's disgusting, but that's where we are. So we can't know that a full-term baby is being born left to die, and then what are they doing with it, and why are they doing it? So,
Sure.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. For the life issues, for those of you who don't know me, obviously, I'm a father of 9, so I guess life is very important to me. But it should be important to our society as well. What Senator Wiesenberg brought up is exactly right. The statistic is nearly 70% of women who had an abortion, they were polled and said that if they had support, they wouldn't have had the abortion. So we are failing women in our society here terribly. And the negative effects that it has on our society is huge. I believe Representative Krisha brought up workforce. We have an aging population. This has a detrimental impact on workforce numbers. So when we look at having to bring in workers from another country to fill those gaps, it's because we're not having kids. Why aren't we having kids? We've created a society that both parents have to work as income earners. It wasn't like that long ago. You could own a car, a house, and in a middle-income neighborhood in the 60s, early 70s, and it worked, and they had families. And we're not that way anymore. So what happened? What changed? You know, the push to have more people into the workforce changed things a little bit, but the cost of living has gone up way more than wages have. So now it takes two people to survive in a household. And that's where you get the pressure from parents who say, we can't afford another kid. We're barely getting by on 2 incomes now. So let's look at what the cause and effect of these things are. Regulation is huge. Every time we create another regulation, it adds a cost. And if it's to a producer of whatever, a widget, that cost gets passed on to the consumer. And it affects the working class people. So a lot of times we see this, especially in the tax committee, well, this is a tax that was going to affect businesses. Directly, yes. Indirectly, it affects everyone. Because those businesses are going to pass that tax, the cost of that tax, or regulation, onto the consumer. So taxes in the state of Minnesota, and it varies a little bit how you look at the numbers, roughly 40 to 45% of your income goes to taxes. And I believe in the late 60s, it was somewhere around, was it 8 to 12? I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers here with me. But when you have to earn that much more income just to survive, yes, of course, you're going to look at every kid that you have and go, can we afford this? So these are systematic problems that I think we have to look at and say, the bigger picture is here, this has created this issue, this has created this issue, this has created this issue, and now we don't even have a positive birth rate in our country. It takes 2.1, 2.2 kids per couple to maintain population, and we're at 1.7. Countries across the world are seeing the same number. Japan right now, it's absolutely amazing what their numbers are. They have empty houses sitting around. I don't want to see our communities, our state, with empty houses. Because a housing shortage is bad. Empty houses is terrible. Imagine your small town, where right now we have the baby boomer generation, 60 years old, starting at the retirement age. Average life expectancy is 73 for women. 78 for men, 78 for women. So in the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to see a loss in population. They also, the baby boomer generation, holds a fair amount of income and properties. A housing shortage right now, if we don't have workers, if we don't have kids, is going to turn into a housing surplus in the not too long term. These are all things that are tied to life issues. They're tied to regulations. And I promote this every chance I get. It's a little old school, but I loved Paul Harvey. And he talked about freedom to change is a good one, and how government growth affects so many things. And look at society after society after society through history, and when those things progress to a certain point, those societies collapse. I do believe our country has come a long ways from our founding, and it is a phenomenal place to live, and it is a beacon. Why do so many people want to come here? Because we have the best opportunities, but we are squandering opportunities right now as well. We're creating undue regulation, undue taxes. The size of government has grown to an exponential point where we really have to look at how we're doing business. I believe in more local control, less oppressive big government. And let's get back to, the independent mentality that we had before. We can take care of ourselves. We don't need Big Brother standing over our shoulder telling us how to do everything in our lives. So as far as pro-life, it's a bigger picture, but we have to promote helping, especially women, through pregnancy resource centers. I started a bill on this last year. We discussed it quite a bit, knowing that it would go nowhere with the current environment. It is sitting right now, but it will definitely get presented. And I say if we can spend, and I don't have a definite number, but if we can spend as much money on ending life, we should spend as much, if not more, on supporting life. And that's something that we have to do in our state here. So, thank you.
And then just 1 second, the bill that you talked about, the vets, I did talk to, who did I talk to in the Senate? Jeff Howe about that, and, we can bring that back up and reintroduce that bill just quickly, so, yeah.
Perva, I apologize. I should have brought this up earlier, but maybe we should stand for the pledge and do the pledge quickly, and then we can get back to the rest of our response.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You're welcome. Sorry about the ear. Yeah. So there's a lot to cover in this, and John, thank you. Thank you for your question. Thank you for the way that you framed the question too, because we have to be talking about the future. But quickly, in this, I also want to appreciate Morrison County and the board, because we're still flying the real Minnesota flag over here, and I sure appreciate that. Then I'll just make note here on this. One of the things that happened during this legislative session was this very radical left attempt to pass this extreme unequal rights amendment. Equal rights amendment is the verbiage that they used. And I'm going to go into that for a second. But they were trying to change our state's constitution to codify abortion into the Constitution of the state of Minnesota, in addition to changing the safe spaces for our girls and for women by erasing their ability to have a private place in a bathroom or a locker room. And that would have been codified in that Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. But amidst that moment, I think it gave each of us an opportunity, and for us in the House, a full week long time to kind of really fully digest what's in the Minnesota Constitution. And I have to say, if you haven't, and I get it, most people probably haven't, but what I came away from is from 1858, from the settlers and from the founders of the state of Minnesota, I am so appreciative to the way that they centered Minnesota on faith and our relationship with God. The preamble to our state's constitution reads, "We the people of the state of Minnesota, grateful to God for our civil and religious liberty and desiring to perpetuate its blessings and secure the same to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this constitution." In part, in saying that, our founders essentially took a position of a more faith-forward commitment in our Constitution than is even seen inside the United States Constitution. Minnesota's founders did that. We stand on their shoulders when we fight for life. We stand on that background of faith and knowing that it's that relationship that we have with our Heavenly Father that comes before other things, which is an opportunity for us. And John, absolutely, we are going to fight for the women's right to know. We're going to fight for pregnancy resource centers, for that funding to support and come around families that are especially in need. To what Representative Wiener said, I couldn't agree more. This is a priority for us. This is what the priority should be. And we have to be committed to that. We have to be committed as a community, as a culture, as a society to creating a culture that supports life. And so that abortion recording data is incredibly important. It's not personal. It's not sharing anybody's personal information, but having the data, the bulk data as to how many abortions are taking place in Minnesota. You could go a little bit further and say, where are they taking place? Are they taking place in St. Cloud? Are they taking place in St. Paul or Duluth or Rochester or Little Falls? That data is helpful and informative. They ask us as legislators to bring the data, to bring the science on the decisions that we make on a daily basis over everything else in state government. Why wouldn't we do that over something as important as protecting human life, an entire class of people? That's incredibly important. But let me talk about where we're at today and where we have to go to. Obviously, you've heard us so far talk about how much we do support pregnancy resource centers. But it's really more of a call to each one of us in the community. And several of us here in this room are involved in church leadership. It's our role to come alongside women where they're at in our community through the lens of the entities outside of government. That's really where the number one place that this should happen is in our churches today. We have an incredible faith community across this county. Our churches are well set up to do that, but they actually need to lean into it more. And that's not just here. That's across our state, that's across our country, and that is how we build a culture of life, by supporting women at every step of the way. And we don't need government to do that. You know, when I'm not a state representative, what am I doing? I'm a fundraising auctioneer helping organizations like pregnancy resource centers. I've got a call this afternoon doing just that. But I'm doing that through my private lens, which is a call to each and every one of us as individual citizens to be involved and engaged in that. If your church isn't currently doing the types of things that help support that woman who's in need, or that family, young family, husband and wife, or young couple that's in need, if you're not doing that right now, are we missing the mission field before us in the moment? I think we are. And that's my challenge. That's the number one way that we can shift the culture of life. It's not from government. I don't believe in a government that's from the top down. It's from the grassroots up. And it's from the people using the tools and the toolboxes in our own communities to serve the people in our communities. And then, John, in a place like Morrison County, where we know that we have this incredible support for life, we can even branch out and help support the communities who have a bigger need, like St. Cloud. And that's our mission field, and that's what we should be committed to.
All right. So a couple things. First of all, John, on the veterans issue, and Jim Storley has this because the last time you were here and Jim Burnett, we actually drafted and have a House resolution. Representative Schultz and I signed on to that. So we actually have a House position supporting that. So we have taken a step. That's there. It's available for the legions to see that there is a House position on that. And a good friend of mine that was already mentioned, and also a roommate down there, Senator Jeff Howe, him and I have worked very closely on veterans issues. Lots of good veterans issues. And on this, so the problem is it's just not moving as fast as we'd like. There's broad support for it. It will happen. It's just, it's not been moving fast enough. So, but I want to let you know we did take action on it. We got a couple steps forward. On the abortion issue, and I'll be succinct on this. First of all, thanks for all your work with MCCL. I was glad my wife and I were happy to work the booth, so thanks for that opportunity. The problem with the abortion issue, like everything else, is once you run it through politics, we make it worse. If you had gone back to the Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court, which left this up to the states, before coming into that election, the Republicans basically said, hey, Supreme Court's made the decision on this. We're not going to expand or contract the abortion issue. We're going to work on other issues. And what happened was, our policy was, listen, this has already been decided. We weren't going to reverse those laws. We didn't have a governor do it. We didn't have enough votes in the legislature. But in fact, what happened was once the trifecta came in, once all three branches went to the Democrats, they expanded it. So we went from a position of we should have done nothing more on it. We should have left it where it was, to now we're looking at abortion on demand. We're looking at abortion up to, they would like to see abortion up to almost birth. And the problem is we're dealing with people here. when we talk about the abortion issue, the respect for life is one thing, but let's also talk about the respect for these mothers. And I've worked with lots of families. When you have a mother that comes out of an abusive situation that's pregnant, or you have a young lady and you have a 16, 15-year-old that gets pregnant, that woman is headed for poverty. And we have one side of the coin here that has convinced these young ladies that there's an easy fix if you just terminate that pregnancy and make this is just a healthcare thing. But the reality of it is, if we put some respect to that young lady and we put some compassion to them, and we go to a pregnancy center and we look at the adoption, or we look at families that will take these children in, we can change this culture. We're not going to do it through politics, because right now, and you heard about the ER, we have two sides that are using this as an election issue. This should not be an election issue. This should be an issue that we're dealing with in our families. We have the Democrat that they're going to push votes on this. That's what they want. They wanted nothing more than an ERA amendment because that believed it would have driven voter turnout. What we need to do is we need to get back to these families, and we need to start working with them compassionately, one by one, through our churches, through our mission, our pilgrimages, because I challenge you, if you haven't, and I say this broadly because we have, go work with a young lady that's come out of an abusive home that's pregnant. In her world, her options are pretty bleak, and they don't have to be. But we take things down to St. Paul, and we treat it like a religion. St. Paul's not a religion. We pass a bill, we pass a policy, we send it off, we pass a budget, then we get out of the way. We're supposed to be a part-time legislature that does infrastructure and education, that's what's in our Constitution, and pass a state budget. Then we should stop with all these other issues. And what happens is both sides of the aisle believe we get into your homes, we get into your families, and we tell you what to do, and that's wrong. That's just wrong. And so if we really want to make some issues on the abortion, let's back our policies off on the state gov. Let's get out of there, and let's start helping fund pregnancy centers. Let's help our churches. Let's help the people that are going to help these young ladies and these families that are in crisis. That's what's going to solve it. We are one of the most advanced nations in the world. We should not have no respect for life. That just makes no sense for me. But thanks for all your work with MCCL.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is John Ulrich. I live in Lincoln Township here in Morrison County. I would like to have an explanation on the bill that was passed on the public waterways in Minnesota and how it affects the farmers, and also the rumor about ditches becoming public property so that anybody can hunt on their property and that type of thing. So if you can have an explanation for that, it's going to affect a lot of farmers in Morrison County. Thank you.
I guess I'll start with this one. This came through environmental committee. I sit on the environmental committee. This was there's two bills that were running with each other. John, do you remember the Senate file? I have one. I think it was Senate file 3558. It was a public waters bill, and the other one was it was like one number away, so 7 or 9, 3559 or 7. I'm not sure. I believe so. There's been a debate: who owns the waterways? What is a public waterway? We already have a public waters land map, and that's been around for a while in the states. And now what the state of Minnesota is doing when I read the bill, is trying to expand our public waterways. So increase what they consider to be public water. And I look at it as as if you have, let's say you're a farmer right now and you have 40 acres and you farm and you have it all in ag, and the state comes in and says, well, in 1814, part of that was a swamp. You need to put it back to the swamp. So now they're taking your land. So that's taking land. They can't do that. Now you might have to put 10 of your acres back into swamp. So now you only have 30 acres. So they're in the bill, if you read it, and I brought this up to the Department of Ag, and I brought it up, I was talking with Senator Tory Westrom. He's been involved in ag quite a bit. And I said, I'm afraid at what this bill might do to farmers. So we can't afford to be taking their land away. So what part of the bill how I read it and how I interpret it is, we're going to make somebody put their land back into a waterway, and then the other bill says once it's a waterway, now it becomes public. So Senator Mary Kunish is she's also the one that had the bills to give all the tribal land back as well, which I actually I'm going to go over. Let me stay on this topic right here. But what I see is they're going to use this one bill to make farmers convert land back to swamp or wetland, I should say, and whatever it was. And then once they do that, the other bill says it will now be public. So even if you had 100 acres and 30 of it was swamp, now you're going to have to convert that back to what it used to be. And then how do we know what it used to be? And when do we? How far back in the records do we go? And do we look at meanders and oxbows? And what do we do? Let's leave farmers alone. We can't afford to be taking land away from farmers. And once again, increasing taxes and having less money in people's pockets. And this could all just lead up to the let's all eat insects and get people off the land. I mean, that's going from here to that extreme, but that's literally what they're pushing. They want us to eat insects. They actually want to put insects in our food products in Minnesota. We debated this on the Senate floor, and not even put on the label that it's in there. So I brought this up because I have a condition called idiopathic anaphylaxis, and I anaphylact to mayfly, dead mayflies. It's just weird. It's just a thing. It's a histamine thing. So I need to know if there's dead insects in my food because I could die if I eat it. And the Democrats said they don't care. It's a chance they're willing to take. So I just went from farming to there, but that's what we're doing. We're pushing people off of farmland, and then we're going to force them to do something and then not even tell them what's in their food product. So no, we shouldn't be taking farmers' lands away. We shouldn't be making ditches public. If someone has private land, it's their private land. The government doesn't have any say in taking your private land away and telling you what to do with your private land. You purchased it, and that's the way it is. So then I'll just go in real quick with the other thing with the giving back the lands. There, Senator Steve Green. So he is a Republican senator who lives up around Bemidji. He's part of the White Earth Band. He's a tribal member, and he said probably 90% of the tribal members don't want this to happen. They're happy with the people that they live around and live with, and we're all living and working well together. This is just some far left people in the tribe that want the land back, say it's going to be beneficial, and then they say we're not going to keep you off the land. Well, this is public land that has come out of taxpayer dollars. We've used it. We don't want to keep anyone from using the land, and they said they already are using it, and if they get it back, they're not going to keep people off land. Well, that's not true. I've seen where they've already got land back, and right away they post it not public. It's tribal land. So let's work together. Let's live together. Let's move forward and quit fighting. But so I just wanted to hit on that just in case that came up and someone said right now those bills died. They didn't go anywhere, but. Rather than continue to fight, let's not do that. And even the Red Lake tribes, when I was going and talking to people about all the wolf issues that we've been having, I had someone that spoke with me. They've got land on the east side of the original reservation, and it's cropland, and they had Native Americans deer hunting in their crop fields. They called the DNR. The DNR got to the original boundary, and they wouldn't come on and kick people off of private property. Well, what do you think is going to happen when that happens more? You can't be trespassing and hunting on private property, and then you call and ask someone for help who's supposed to help you, and they don't do anything. That's going to lead to trouble, and we can't do that. We need to not have wars. We need to just be peaceful. And things happened in the past. It's unfortunate. Let's move forward. But no, I'm going to fight to not let anyone take your land away and tell you what to do with your land. It's your land, and the government shouldn't be thinking of it as theirs. So,
Senator Wiesenberg covered the vast majority of that. In regards to your question, John, it's this change to the public waters inventory that's going to impact you the most. And so, if I'm remembering correctly from session, in 2027 is really when they're going to begin this. Basically, this mapping or this new, not new, but they're building out the inventory, and so they're going to be mapping those ditches and waterways, and that's especially where I think that whether it's your property or people in similar circumstances would have the most concern. I guess from my perspective. I'm hoping that we're able to make some positive change on this in the next 2 years if we're able to achieve some balance at the state capitol, because this was probably the top thing, the most concerning thing that I heard from the folks who represent the agriculture interests at the Capitol. I remember them on the last weekend of session, just like head down, like they just been beat down by basically the chair of the House Environment Committee, who is someone who is absolutely opposed to anybody who's trying to make money farming.
I didn't support it. I voted no.
I think in a broader sense, you have to look at what's going on globally as well. With the war in Ukraine, Ukraine is considered the breadbasket of Europe. Okay, a lot of land did not get put back into production with the war that's going on over there. Follow what's happening in Europe. There has been farmers' protests going on in the Netherlands, Germany, several other countries because of overregulation. Now, even when we look at food production and so forth, it's not just a microcosm. It's not just your farm. It's not just somewhere else. When we look at global markets and so forth, a drought in India causes rice shortage. Rice goes to many people across the world. So India used to be an exporter. 1 year of drought, and now they didn't send anything out. So when we see overregulation in our country, in our state, whether it's just a buffer issue, we saw there was a tax on, and I don't remember all the details, but a tax on the fertilizer. And that used to be used for research, and that was talked about being cut. But you have people in charge of agriculture, the committees, which Representative Schultz here just mentioned, who have no connection with agriculture at all, on the Senate side or on the House side, and making regulations that have a negative impact on the farmers. Now, we can't control the weather. You can't. I can't. I don't know of a farmer out there that wants to see their soil erode. Not a single one. Who likes to drive through those ditches or those washouts? I sure as heck don't. But yet when they see this, they say we need to do something about that issue. We need to put more regulation into place. Nobody wants to see their topsoil gone. So we need to have a common sense approach. When we talk about legislation like this, overregulation causes us more issues than anything else. Even the 50-foot buffer, when I asked the question several years ago at the county level, why is it 50 foot? Well, I don't know. What's the science that says 50 foot is the number? It took me almost a year to find out that it was kind of an arbitrary number based on modeling. So is 50 foot the right distance that we need? It's not even based in science by the sounds of it. So overregulation kills us. There again, I talked about it before. When we put our fingers into too many things, it just creates more problems. A food shortage is a real danger in our global economies as well. Like I said, a simple drought in India, with their amount of rice that they produce, could have a negative impact across the globe. So, and when we see the farmers' protests in Europe and those regulations coming here, that's something we really need to push back on.
And also with, something always pops up in my head, but talking to people in the ag industry and then, all this stuff comes through environmental committee also, they say they got a lot of the BMPs or the best management practices, they got them from farmers already. So what we're using is like, well, this is what the farmers are doing, let's put it in law. Well, the farmers are already doing it because it costs farmers money for every inch of soil that goes off the property. It costs farmers money for too much fertilizer use. So the farmer is a great businessman because they know what they're doing, and if they don't do it right, they're screwed. So let's listen to the farmers, and let's help the farmers, and let's do what they know what to do.
Good morning. Brian Bergs, Bellevue Township, Morrison County. Thank you, Ms. Watton, to the Little Falls Chamber for hosting this, and thank you to the representatives. You thanked us for being here. You've also given up your morning to be here. So thank you for that. I'm going to set up my question, my suggestion a little bit to give myself some credentials. I've recently moved to my current home from Minneapolis after spending 40 years in Minneapolis proper. I was 20 years a Hennepin County employee, chief financial officer for several divisions of Hennepin County. I want to integrate what all of you have said into my suggestion, my question. And so given that, I want to tell you that the city of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, and Hennepin County in particular, are insane in their decisions that they are making. I don't want to be paying for it. Senator Wiesenberg, Senator Wiener, you talked about there's too much taxes, there's too much government spending, and that is certainly true for Minneapolis and Hennepin County, but they are making that decision. I spent 20 years as a Minneapolis City Republican Committee leader, trying to get something changed. It's very difficult in the city. We had very good candidates, but we could not move off getting 20-25% for a Republican candidate. So my own credentials, I know what I'm talking about. What I'm looking for and for what you have been discussing this morning, being very frustrated as being part of a minority, that you are not able to move anything at the state legislature. You may have to ratchet things back. Representative Krisha, thank you for your work as a manager in trying to manage something getting done. My appreciation for that, and accept your apology, but I do understand. It's very difficult.
Someone's got to take responsibility.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly correct. So to the guts of this, I want to bring up something, Representative Schultz, that you brought up, that there are some swing districts. Can you, and I want to encourage you to create some coalitions within the state government, especially next year as we go into the biennium budget, to ratchet back some of the spending that is being done, especially in giving subsidies to Hennepin County, Ramsey County, state of Minnesota, city of Minneapolis, city of St. Paul, where they are making these insane decisions. Can you peel off some of the Democratic outlying suburban representative senators to join a coalition to not fund the insanity that's happening there? The Uber thing is a perfect example. They created that problem, and then they're asking the state to bail them out. But there are other things where they're creating problems and they're going to be asking the state to come up with dollars to bail them out. We cannot do that. I resent it from Morrison County to be doing that, to be paying for their insanity. And I would just, you're smiling, Representative Schultz, but I think that there are swing districts that you described where we can come up with some solutions to this and not be quite as frustrated. We can't get everything through. The life issues are important, but boy, we've got a big split on that in the state. For a lot of the management issues, we do not. And you will be able to find, I believe, people that will see things your way. They aren't quite as crazy in Anoka, Dakota, Scott County, some of those surrounding suburban counties. So let me encourage you. I don't know if there's anybody that wants to respond. It's a suggestion and a question.
Yeah, I'll start with it, Brian. So thanks. It was nice to meet you and your wife on the way in. So thanks. So you touched on something that's very important, and I talked a little bit about that. There's 134 districts, 67 Senate districts. What doesn't work is, we tend to be in the districts we represent very, very red, very hardcore with our conservative principles, and that's okay. That's the constituency. But as we slide into the metro, as we start to get to those outer rings, even the Iron Range, they tend to be more moderate in their issues. If you go up in the Iron Range, even where we won some seats with Representative Scraba, and we're going to probably win another one near the Hibbing area, they are very, very pro-union, very pro-worker, and they tend to look for more IRRB money and subsidies money because of the nature of who they are. I will just tell you that, and you mentioned life, on every one of these issues, we are going to have to figure out how to work with constituencies that are different than ours. It's the way the government's supposed to work. We will see suburban families that are more in the middle and moderate, even on these life issues. I mean, is where I am on the life, but I can talk to people that I can tell you are left of center on the life, but more right of center on conservative issues. And the fact of the matter is, we're going to have, if we want to win the majority in the House, and I'll just speak for the House, we're going to probably have to pick up 4 to 5 seats of folks that are not as far right and conservative as many of the other districts. That's just a fact of life. It's not that they're wrong. Those people have chosen those. And we need to figure out how to work and compromise with them, because frankly, having a House majority and having 6 to 7 members that would be more center issued or more moderate still would stop a lot of the legislation that would have happened. Just simply stopping that. And you know, their districts. When you look at Burnsville, for example, Representative Jeff Whitty in Lakeville, and he served in they did a great job, but they lost officers and emergency people to a shooting. And Jeff, who's fantastic, a retired law enforcement officer, was working on those issues and working with law enforcement, and not using those crises of deaths in law enforcement to push gun legislation. We should have been separating those, and Jeff was trying to do that. So my point is, we are going to have to find ways to work with our colleagues across the state and get us more to the right of center on the fiscal policies, maybe leave the social issues alone, and get us to a majority first so we can get balance and we can set some things back. My fear is this. We have the Republicans have a very good chance of winning the House back. I think if that happens and we don't become good managers and stewards of the budget, we could lose and be right back with a trifecta in 2 years in a governor's race. We have to be good governors. We have to be good stewards. We have to show that we can run the place, and then that we can contain a sustainable division, because it works best when there's 2 parties. It just does. So that's what I would add to that, and I think you've seen that coming out of where you are, is we need to have conflict, we need to have healthy debate, and then we need to figure out where in the middle we can either meet or not pass things. That's what I would offer.
Brian and Paula, thanks for making your home here in Morrison County. We're glad to have you. And your wisdom and knowledge is helpful, right? Just coming out of the environment that you have in the Twin Cities and Hennepin County. I know even from the private conversations that we've had that's benefited the way that I look at the legislature and possible outcomes should we have the opportunity and the responsibility to lead in the majority. So, and it's also a good challenge for any one of us up here to be trying or seeking to find those coalitions, to seek to find those relationships with people who can help us achieve these goals of a more responsible state government. And to your point on state spending, look, we can't continue on our current trajectory. We've all up here talked about how this was a grotesque increase in state government, 40% increase in state spending in one biennium, and $10 billion worth of new taxes and fees in one biennium. And we can't continue on that path. And at the same time, even though they raise taxes by that much money, they will not be able to create a government budget surplus. Like we are going to be in a deficit next year if we continue on this current course, and so that's an opportunity. To Representative Krisha's point on, we need to show Minnesotans that we can lead and lead well. That is going to mean, and I'll say it to you all in a very transparent way, we will need to cut spending. It's not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. And so I look forward to those conversations. I'm going to seek them out. And as you, Brian, or anyone in the room have ideas of specific areas of the state budget that you say, we can slice this, please send them my way. I'm building a list. I already have a list, over a dozen ideas of where to cut spending from based upon what the Democrats did these last 2 years. But I think the regionalization, to the point that Representative Krisha made, is certainly a fact. Every region, and especially these Democratic legislators over these last 2 years, has spent a lot of time grabbing their slice of the pie. whether that's Minneapolis districts, Iron Range districts, St. Cloud districts, Rochester districts. They have all been clamoring and trying to grab their slice of the pie, which is how we got to a place where we had a 40% increase in state spending. And our first priority should be the taxpayer's family budget, and thinking about it through the lens of that, rather than what piece of the pie can I garner for my own community. You know, there was one instance at the end of session. I sit on the Labor and Industry Committee, and there was a lot that happened in that frame in the last 2 years. But right here at the end of session, one of the big topics was there was this one constituency, just one group of people in South Minneapolis that wanted to build a workforce training center primarily for people who are not here legally. And that one line item was $9.5 million to support a group of people not only who aren't here legally, they also have ties to being the people who obstruct the institutions of society, who support the people who are trying to defund the police, and others. I mean, literally, anti-American principles. And we made this point, and yet they moved forward with this $9.5 million for this one workforce training center in South Minneapolis. And that given workforce training center is wholly duplicative with every college and university in the state, and especially the state colleges and universities, the two-year schools, the vocational training schools. It's just super duplicative. It doesn't have a place in this world, in addition to the fact that many of, if you want to work in the trades today, you can go do an apprenticeship program. You have all these training facilities or employers in the private sector who have this opportunity for you to come work for them. They'll start paying you, and then they'll train you how to do your job. What happened this session was just so out of touch, and it had no care for Minnesota family budgets, and we have to get back to that. And I look forward to building those coalitions to rein in state spending.
Where to begin? So the metrocentric governorship, legislative focus is, once again, we got to look at why and how we got here. And I think it was in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, where as a nation, we went from a rural population majority to a metro population majority. I think it was the late 80s. And you've seen this change, the shift. So I was out in California a couple years ago, and we sat down and talked with some people, and they basically said that the metro areas, LA, so forth, controlled the state. So I am we're at a military base. We went and had supper off, and having a discussion, and I thought California was just liberal. I thought everybody here was liberal. But everybody here I'm sitting down and having supper with they would fit in my neighborhood. I thought this is really interesting because I had this perception of California. But what we've had, like I said, is this split, this difference between metrocentric versus rural. And this is not my idea, but we started this process, and we're going to try it, see where it can go. But there was an individual in Wadena that said, Alan is his name, he said, how come we're not set up like the federal government? What do you mean? Your House members are set by population on the federal government. We have 8 congressional districts, but we only have 2 senators per state. He said, why don't we have House members set up by the population, just like they are now, but every county in the state would have a senator? And I thought about it, and I went, that's a really good idea. Because that balances out the representation in the state. Now, in this state, it would take a constitutional amendment. So we look at those situations, though, and go, okay, why was it done this way? How do we change things, so that no matter who's in charge, the people are represented. So it's one senator, one county, and I think it has merit. We're going to try to see what we can do with it, but that would give people an equal representation in the state. When you talk about funding for for those metro projects, and you mentioned one in the economic or resource center, or jobs, We saw several of these where the city of, say, Brooklyn Park wanted funding to make their area of their city towards medical devices and so forth. I look at that and I say, is that an issue that the taxpayers from greater Minnesota should be paying for? What are our chances of getting that same funding out here for Little Falls, for Long Prairie, for Sauk Center, Wadena? Very little. So those projects that I saw, our taxpayer dollars, your property taxes, your sales taxes, everything else are going to going to the state, which then are funding projects that will build and grow the metro. We also know that with current expansion and the areas of growth are going to be along the corridors, the commercial corridors. I talk about this quite a bit. Look at history. Little Falls is a prime example. When it was developed for settlers, people came here, the river was your commercial corridor. Goods and service product flowed on the river. After that, the railroads came through. So you guys had both here for a while. After that, the railroads started to go away or decline, and we see the highways, and now it's the freeways. So Little Falls is in a very good situation. You still have railroad, you still have the highways coming through here, but not a lot of areas do. And there's going to be funding that's coming from the federal level to promote growth along those corridors. But where does that leave the rest of rural Minnesota? Your small towns and areas that are not on those corridors. So there's a gas station that just contacted me recently. He said, I can get funding for new gas tanks for environmental issues in my gas station, but I can't get an EV charging station. He said, I really want one. I said, let me guess, it's federal money. He said, yep. I said, what is the regulation on that? It said it has to be along a corridor. It has to be along Highway 10, has to be along I-94, 35, 169. So the growth is going to be in certain areas. That will affect us. And that will have a negative impact if you're not on those corridors. We're paying for projects for growth in the metro and along other places, and the potential for some of those funds coming back are going to be challenging in the future. Our county commissioners are going to have to look at their budgets, as Representative Schultz said. How do we, in the future here, knowing that MMB, Minnesota Management and Budget Office, says we're heading towards a deficit? And how is that going to affect our local areas, especially the ones that don't have those corridors or those expected growth areas in their cities, in their counties, or whatever? There is going to be challenges moving ahead. And I think education is huge, but we also need to kind of fight for our rural voice out here. I think the one senator, one county idea is gaining traction. We're still in the early stages. We did a couple talks on it recently. It's been presented to some counties, but that would balance out that representation at the Capitol. When we talked about, and I believe Isaac said this as well, the 40% growth in government last year, well, the last 2 years basically. How many people out in our area have seen a 40% increase in their income? I don't know if anybody has. But when government grows at that rate, and it statistically has gone from about an 8 to 10% growth every year to now a 40% growth. On top of that, the growth that took place with the, depending upon how you look at the numbers, a $17.5 billion surplus, $19.5 billion with inflation figured in, that was one-time money that was spent on long-term spending. The number of FTEs, or full-time employees, that were added to the state, with those positions being filled, I believe the state would become the largest employer in the state. Now, if you come from a business setting and your management, your top tier, is higher than the people that are producing the widgets, those companies will almost always fail. We are going to have to look very seriously. It was talked about being responsible with the taxpayers' money, absolutely. Budgets are going to have to get focused in different ways. They're going to have to be trimming. We don't have a tax problem, we have a spending problem. And it will be difficult in the next few years to figure out the best areas to do that, which cause the least amount of disruption or pain to the citizens.
You talked about working together and things, and as they hit on, hopefully we can take back the House this year, and then we can stop some things in the House. Hopefully we can have a shot at taking the Senate too. There were 3 senators that potentially, if we focus the right energy in the areas we've got up in Detroit Lakes, Rob Kupek. He was basically in the Socialist Party, put a D behind his name so he could run, and he went from a area that was Democrat but pro-life and pro-gun, and now he's a Democrat that is neither, or he didn't vote that way, right? So if we can focus some energy there and try to take that Detroit Lakes area back, we can win the Senate there. Judy Seeberger, over by Stillwater, east of the cities, barely won her election. Let's focus our energy there and remind people what the Democrat policies are doing to our state. It's taking the money out of your pockets and it's hurting you. We got Grant Housechild up in the northeast angle of Minnesota. He got a lot of heat, I think, last year from people up there. He represents miners and blue-collar workers and people that don't agree with a lot of things he voted on, because he was all on board with the socialist agenda that got passed last year. And he pulled it back a little bit this year in session. I think because his voters were frustrated. I don't think that's what he thinks necessarily, but so those are just 3 quick areas we can focus on those people in the next Senate race. Hopefully, we can take back the House. But I did have working with the senators I can work with. Like Uber Lyft was Senator Omar Fateh. He's a socialist. He thinks the state should take your money and redistribute it evenly between people, no matter how hard you work or don't work. And like Ron was talking about, we can't have the government making laws on private business, and that's what happened. So now the government is regulating private industry. I suggested, rather than doing that, let Uber and Lyft leave the state. There's already companies that are coming in to fill that void. Like, there's already companies that are going to come in and take over their spot today, and that was something we'd have to worry about. Don't give him what he wants. Then that helps people. We don't get pulled into their agenda. They need to go away. I had a bill that I wrote to get rid of the bottom tax bracket. So the bottom taxpayers, if you're in the bottom tier tax bracket, you would pay no income tax. I had bipartisan support on that. John Hoffman signed on that bill with me. He got a bunch of heat from his people, but that helps everybody. It doesn't help just Democrats. It doesn't just help Republicans. It helps everybody. And that we need things like that. And then, in the environmental committee, I got a bunch of bills passed without even voting on them. And I just talked about science and biology, talking with Senator Herr. He's the chair for environment. Like, these are things we need to do. Here's the science behind it. I have a degree in wildlife biology. I'm a scientist. I understand these things. So I talked to people. I showed them this is how it should be. And we got things passed without even voting on it on the floor. We just agreed to it. Now, it's hard when you have Rick Hansen in the House, who he's the lead of the environmental committee in the House, who is, I don't know what he is. He just doesn't think that we should be doing things with science. He just wants to use politics. You can't politic the environment, and that's wrong. But, I'll talk about one more thing, and then we'll get to the next question. But, we've got deer farmers are being attacked right now in Minnesota. So the DNR says, CWD, we can't have deer farms. They have to double fence, or, they can't have farms anymore. So there's a deer farmer in Wisconsin who's been selective breeding to breed deer that are basically resistant to CWD, right, in Wisconsin. So we have these genetics, and we could bring those genetics into Minnesota deer farms and just breed it out. I actually called Pennsylvania. I talked with the Department of Natural Resources, or whatever they call it in Pennsylvania, and they're actually doing that with their deer farmers in their state. I read it online, so I called them, and they said, yes, we are working with our deer farmers to help them breed CWD out of their deer farms. So last year I wrote a law to help deer farmers to say, let's bring in CWD resistant semen into Minnesota and let's breed our deer with those. So then the Democrats tried to make a law to ban CWD free deer semen. I fought it 3 times in committee. Those are the things we're fighting. Stupid things that it's easy. 1 + 1 = 2. So finally the 3rd time they said, you're right, we can do this, let's do it. But we're wasting time and money and energy on these things when we shouldn't be wasting time and money and energy on these things. And it all adds up. It's a death of 1,000 cuts. Everything adds up. These little things that are common sense, we shouldn't be fighting over them. It said, yes, you're right, we should pass it. So that's what we need to do. But what are deer farmers doing in Minnesota right now? They're going to court to fight for their rights. Their constitutional rights are being violated to have a farm. And what happens when deer farms go down? We got hog farms and chicken farms and beef. It's next. They're doing it in California. If you got a space this big for a pig, now it has to be double. So you just cut the amount of pork production in California in half. That's coming to Minnesota. And farmers work hard. They're working hard every day, 365 days a year. They don't have time to pay attention to politics. They assume things are working right, but they might not see what's coming. So if it starts with deer farms, it's next. It's just going to go right down the line, and it's going to be too much government regulation. We got to pull it back, and when we pull it back, and if we get back in the majority, we got to stop spending.
Didn't mean any disrespect standing up here. So, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for your service. I'm Tina Simons, Kennebec County. Both Representative Krisha and Schultz are in Kennebec County, so that's why I'm here. I do not have a question, but rather a statement and a comment about the bill authored by Representative Ron Krisha in 2021. The bill number is HF 2409, which appropriated $5 million for legal services to illegals. I will read you part of the bill. The general fund to improve access to civil legal services for persons to obtain, maintain, or improve their immigration legal status or obtain citizenship. I do not have anything against immigrants. However, that is $5 million of our taxpayer money to help people who are illegal. On May 22nd, Representative Krisha answered a question and provided a statement as to why he authored this bill. He gave me one instance of why he authored the bill. To me, $5 million for that one family seems like a lot of money. And we talked about, I think you said it, Representative Krisha, good stewards of the budget. So spending like this has to stop. And this bill was so good that Sandra Feist, the far left socialist, signed on to it. So thanks for fighting for people in your district.
Well, thanks, Tina. So happy to talk about the bill. So that was in 2021. So in 2021 and throughout, so it's nice to come in and make a statement and leave. Here's what happened. Let's be honest about what really happens out there and the bill was not illegal immigration. It was non-citizen status. We have folks that come into this community and come into this country, doctors, the STEM, we have biologists. We see lots of people that can come in with a non-immigrant status and become residents of this country. If you work for a company, there are ways that you can get legal status and legal immigration. Here's the problem. In our agriculture community, we're bringing folks in, and they're working in our agriculture industry, they're working in our farms, and they don't have the same access to immigration status and resources. So if you have a family, and again, thank you for coming in, throwing a pot shot at me. I will tell you who I am as a person. When I work with a family, and you have a mother and a daughter who are citizens, and a father who is not able to get legal citizenship, and that father is in danger of being deported, we're breaking up families now. So the bill I authored was $5 million for services that we could find statewide to help these families that could try to become citizens. Now, there are ways to become citizens in this country. You can do it through education. You can do it through work status. Look at the medical profession. So if you are a person of means, there are paths to become a resident. If you are a person of non-means, or a person maybe on the lower side of this, and thank you for recording there, if you guys want to continue to put in this, I am not against getting legal citizens into this country and improving our workforce. That's not who I am. So go to your agriculture communities, talk to them. But here's what we can't do. We can't just bring folks in, take advantage of them, not help them with a path to become a citizenship, and then turn them away. I don't think that's what's in the United States Constitution, and I don't think that's what it's about when we're trying to treat people fairly. So that's how I see it. You can look at my record. I have voted against all types of illegal services for people that are here illegally, but I will work with families that are trying to become legal citizens, and they are trying to come through the proper means. I think that's a fair way to do it. So that's where I'm at on that.
John Justin again. I just want to thank you, Ron, for that answer, and I promise you that when I ask you a question, I won't ask the question and then walk out the door and not listen to your response. So thank you.
I'd like to make a comment. We have no problem with anybody coming from wherever they come from, but when we have money and it's coming out of my pocket, now I don't care if you come from wherever you want to come from in the world, you can come here, but we have to do it the legal way, and we can't ask for taxpayer dollars. You can't ask for my money. I've got kids. I'm raising a family. I'm being attacked right now by the government, and it costs me money, so that's more of a burden. So when we're talking about cutting taxes, that's another tax. It's fine helping people. Let's help them get the resources, but that's another tax on taxpayers. So when I didn't have money, I got another job. And when I didn't have enough money, I got another job. I was working 3 jobs to support myself. So I'm putting myself through what I have to do. I was fortunate to be born in America, but I got multiple jobs, and I did what I had to do to get myself out of that time. So now we're putting ourselves in, like I said, every tax is a tax that hurts me, it hurts working families, and now I'm in a spot, or someone's in a spot where they might have to get another job and work harder to pay for someone. And I appreciate people that come from wherever they come from, but we're putting that burden on taxpayers. And if that bill is stated, it says illegals, and there's other documentation out there from how we're trying to help illegals get driver's licenses and things. And we've got such a crisis at our border right now. We don't know who's coming across the border. I was talking to Pete Stauber last night in Aiken, and he brought this issue up. And he was down in Arizona where like 80% of the illegal immigrants are coming through, and it's a Democrat. It's not Republican, it's Democrat. And they're begging the U.S. government to shut the border down and close the border. But then we're writing legislation asking people to come to Minnesota when we don't know who they are. That's great, you want to come here, and that's great that we have people working. But we have to take care of our home before we can open up our home to everybody from everywhere. And that's what our laws in Minnesota are doing. Last year we passed a law in Minnesota. You can come from wherever you want in the world, come to Minnesota and get a driver's license, and then you can be allowed to vote. We can't have those things happen. You want to know how we stop what's going on with our government? Not allowing those things to happen. Once we can fix our home and patch our walls and close the doors on our own home, then we can try to help people. We've got to help people here. Yes, I've worked at a farm, and I've worked with people that are not from America, and they're hard workers. And you know what? They're not the people that go and ask the hospitals to pay for things. They do things, and there's other people that are spending our money through increased health care and things. But that's a tax burden on my family and the citizens that are here. So, like Mike Wiener said, let's have more kids, and let's encourage the people that aren't working to work. We've got a bunch of people that are taking advantage of our system, and they're not working, and they're just living off of socialized whatever. We got to stop doing that. We have to make people work, and let's cut taxes. Rather than raising the minimum wage, I'm in labor, rather than raising the minimum wage, let's keep the minimum wage here, let's cut taxes and lower prices on things so people can afford to live. But when you raise the minimum wage, if I'm a business owner, now I have to raise my prices because I can't eat that. I have to stay in business. So we just keep pushing this up here. Let's encourage people to have kids. Let's help people. Let's help everybody. But we can't continue. This is just another tax on people, and I just don't agree with it. So.
That topic's pretty easy because, these last 2 years, driver's licenses for illegal immigrants, medical assistance and welfare benefits, free college, legal services and housing, all passed the legislature to benefit people here illegally, and all 4 of us voted against it.
Any more questions? Okay, I guess we can move on to the closing statements then.
Oh, should I start? I don't know. Just go this way. Okay. So yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. There's hope. I got into politics because we do live in a great country, and I always think of the people that went before us who fought for us, and we have to fight like hell to support what they did. We got people who died for our country. If we don't stand up for our rights in the Constitution, the rights that they fought and died for, what are we doing? So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm fighting. I want to listen to you. And I've got 3 kids, and I don't want them to have to fight this fight. I'm here standing in the gap, and I'll take the arrows and the bullets, and that's fine, because I don't want my kids to have to do this. If we just continue to do nothing, it's like Minnesota's taking the California model and trying to do that. Let's not do that. Let's like I said, I'm working with the Democrats I can work with, and there are Democrats we can work with. Some just need a prop up and, a push to do something. Hopefully we can get the socialists out. And from what I hear, there's chatter that the Democrats are really fighting internally right now. What does that mean? We'll see after they vote next May if they all stick together again, or if they divide or something, right? But there's internal fighting there. So maybe we can just push them to fight each other, and they can break themselves apart, and we can come in and do something. But I stand for the Constitution. I stand for smaller government. I stand for helping you decide what needs to happen, and the people that are here. And I want to keep listening to you, and I'm going to keep fighting for you. Whatever means necessary, I can do that with. So I appreciate your time here, and we got to win this thing. And I always leave off with, get people out to vote. You need to tell everybody to get off the couch and vote. We left probably 200,000 to 300,000 Republican votes on the table last year. So I agree. Maybe there's some moderate areas in the cities. There are people in greater Minnesota that felt like their voice isn't being heard. So we need to talk to everybody. I'm going to talk to the people in my community. The people are going to talk to their people in their community there. If we got greater Minnesota people that feel like they're being left behind, let's go talk to them. Let's bring them in and say, I am working for you. I am going to be your voice, but you need to get off the couch and vote. Otherwise we don't win. And, so people talk about like voter fraud. Voter fraud, sure, it does happen, but they can't vote too much. So, I'm not going to get into that, but just vote. Just overwhelm the system. Everybody votes and we win. So tell your neighbors, your friends, your family, if they're like-minded, get off the couch and you need to vote. I brought this up last night. I'll bring it up again because I just thought it was kind of funny. But, like my wife's dad is very on the other side of the fence, and we can't talk about politics at the dinner table. What's the first thing he starts doing? He starts talking about politics. Well, he took off the gloves, and we're going to speak. We're going to talk about it, right? So we have these contentions, but we should be talking about these things. It can't be just one person saying something and then we ignore it. I'd rather it be you say something crazy and I say something bad and get mad. But let's try to work together. Let's find a solution, and let's get together and let's get things done. And there are Democrats in Minnesota that can do that, but they're taken over by the far left wing of their party, and they get pulled that way. We got to stop that, and that's what we have to stop what they're doing. We have to stop all the crazy stuff that the far left Democrats are doing, and we need to come back to our values. And there's not just in Minnesota, there's a pendulum shift in America where we're coming back to values and what's right and wrong, and American values in the Constitution. So,
all right, thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chamber of Commerce, for putting this together. It's always an enjoyable experience to promote ideas and discuss about what we saw in the legislation, what we think is important, the negative, but it's also extremely important for the people themselves to say, these are the issues that we see. And I really enjoy listening sometimes more than talking, because how do we know what the issues are to each person or to each area unless we listen? There's a saying that we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we speak. With that being said, we have challenges, and we've lived in a very bountiful time for a long time in our country. And with that comes complacency. And I say that since I was 18 years old, I checked a box. I went and voted every time. But what I didn't do is I didn't watch the cause and effect of politicians, of the votes, and where that's led us. So what we've seen in the last probably 4 or 5 years now is this huge interest in politics again. People want to know what's going on. They see a change in our country, and they say, well, maybe instinctively they know that something's wrong, but they can't necessarily put their finger on it sometimes. We need to get back to common sense in our politics. We need to get back to just not all the partisan stuff sometimes. We do have differences between greater Minnesota and the metro, but human nature doesn't change once you live in the city versus the country. And what works best for the state here shouldn't prioritize one area or another. This is one of the most frustrating things that I see is half of the state gets kind of forgotten. And that really does need some attention. But participation, what I said at the very beginning, politics is a participation sport. Show up. Ask your politicians questions. Let them know what you expect of them. Figure out where their votes are. But then make sure, as the senator said, you go out and vote yourself. Because my dad always used to say, you can't complain too much if you don't get involved. So when we have problems in our state and we don't vote, then the problem is us. Now, I do believe that we have a great state here. We have a great country. We have some setbacks. We have some challenges. But we can right the ship. And I kind of use the comparison of simply taking a walk in the woods. Whoever's gone for a walk in the woods, whether you're hunting, which I usually like to do, but if you have a course that you're heading to, some people like to use a compass, some people like to use the sun, whatever it is, but you have to have something, a goal you're shooting towards. And if you're not doing that, it's pretty easy to get off course. How many people get lost out on a hunting trip? A lot. In our politics, in our country, we've kind of gotten off course a little bit. And instead of prioritizing the people, we've prioritized agendas. And that's a dangerous thing as well. So I say we need to right this ship. Our best days are ahead of us. They're not behind us. We need to look at those challenges, face them head on, find good solutions that work for the people. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. I like the questions and so forth that came up. It's always a learning experience. Thank you.
It's always insightful to hear from the 20-plus folks who choose to spend a Tuesday morning with us as to the key things that are most important to you. And I especially appreciate the comments made by folks who were seeking to chart a vision for the future and where we go from here. We can't change the past. We can't change what happened these last several months, but we can talk about our vision for the future. And hopefully we can build excitement and energy around that vision. And it should be both a short and a long-term vision. What we would do if given the opportunity and responsibility to be in the majority in the Minnesota House, or the opportunity to lead on a statewide basis if we had more control. And we need to earn the trust of Minnesotans through the words that we speak, through the relationships that we hold, and the relationships we build and maintain with the people in our community and with the people across the state. We need to be true to our word. We need to be transparent. We need to be accountable and responsible to the people. And so I hope that in the people that you have the chance to vote for through this election cycle, that you keep in mind some of those principles, or all of those principles, I should say, because we need to restore the trust in our institutions, the key institutions of society. It is the extremists in our country who are trying to tear down the institutions of our society, whether that's the church, whether that's law enforcement, whether it's the legislative branch. People are seeking to divide and create chaos in our country. And we need to get back to the Constitution, get back to our constitutional republic, which means that you have a voice, that you have the opportunity to make change in our community, in our state, in our country, through your elected representatives. That's why we're here. That's why you're here. That's why you're here, to express your opinions and to hopefully be a part of the solution from the ground up, so that as a community, a state, and a country, we can be more free, more prosperous, and more faith-filled. That's my goal as we move forward, and I'm excited to work with you all to achieve that goal in the years to come. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the chamber, and thank you for everyone. We've got about 30 seconds, so I'll be brief. Just quickly, when you get elected and you become a representative, you represent everybody that comes to you. When I am down in St. Paul, I vote my conscience first and then my community. I will tell you that you have lots of conversations, you have lots of problems. The number one job is trying to figure out solutions to those. And we come from different walks of life, we come from different backgrounds, and we have to be respectful of that and understand that. I mean, there are people that I know that I'll go to church with that see the world differently than I do, but at the end of the day, a lot of times we're just trying to build a community and we're trying to build businesses and our families. And those conversations are important to have. I think that the truth can take different conversations and different debates, and I'm open to that. I'll take this as long as I'm elected. I'm coming up for re-election here. If I get elected, great. If not, I understand the will of people. But I'll say this, as long as I'm in office, if people are coming to me with problems and they're coming to me with solutions, I will put my differences aside and try to find solutions to those. I represent 42,000 people in the District of 10A, and not everybody agrees. And that's what we do as representatives. So thank you for what you do. Continue to bring your ideas and challenge us. We need to get to a point where we can move forward, because I suspect I have less than 20 years left on this planet, and the people after me are going to have to solve the problem. So thanks for coming.
Thank you, Senator Wiesenberg, Representative Wiener, Representative Schultz, and Representative Kisha for being here today. And thank you so much for Morrison County for letting us use this room, and to River with GRA to film this. And thank you for getting all of this recorded as well. Remember, always contact your elected official with your comments and concerns. They cannot represent us if they don't know what is bothering us. So again, if you need their contact info, it is out on that table. Thank you all for coming and being here today. Thank you.